So I I just want to clarify for the auditors who will listen to this. The problem is not that we have these social constructs. The problem is when these social constructs make us forget who we are and make us forget the universal creation that bonds us together. So let me explain. For example, when we become collectively more concerned about the nations that are dividing us than we are concerned about the planet that we share together, this is a major problem. When we are more concerned about the profitability of our businesses that are in competition with one another than we are with our humanity, this is becoming dysfunctional. When we are more concerned about our beliefs and our religions and our cultures than we are about the universe that we share in common, this is becoming dysfunctional. And what I just say is where we are. If you look at it, fact, on this planet right now, you'll find millions of men who've been trained to die and kill for their nations. We have to deconstruct the false beliefs, release the fear, and heal the traumas that are keeping us disconnected from the light that is all around us and within us.
How do you become authentic so you can be loving and accepting the fear as a guidance and accepting the light as a guidance, so to have the best life, so you can spread that out to your family, to your region, to your city, to your country, right? To get to a collective awakening, to a collective authenticity. But that's perhaps big, but let's start with ourselves.
No, that's not big. That's the multifaceted. There are many ways to respond, but the first thing that comes to my mind is what very often is standing on the way to be authentic is the fear of being rejected. It's this belief that it is dangerous for me to be authentic. And this is deep-rooted because basically in school, we haven't learned to be authentic. Mostly we have learned to follow the rules, to follow the norm. And so what can be an incentive for us to be authentic is that right now, the norms that we have been learning to follow are not sustainable. And probably the best norm we want to follow are the ones that are going to allow us to be ourselves. And so the first thing is to deal with our fear of being rejected and starting to express what we truly feel, what we truly think, and not what we feel other people will like to hear, other people will reward, other people will validate. So it's starting to practice this inner validation. It's learning to speak our truth, even if it is disturbing for people around us because they are not used to it. And this is something that we have to learn from scratch, because it's almost like you're asking someone who has never walked before and has always climbed on, has been told that the way to be is to crawl, to stand up and walk. The balance is going to take time to find the balance. But here the key is to practice. Knowing that I can only know myself if I allow myself to be authentic. Because otherwise, all I know is my shadow self, is the identity that I have built to fit in, to be accepted and to be rewarded. And so this is a practice. And one key also is to get rid of the idea that others will have to agree with me. So your perspective of reality is unique. My perspective of reality is unique. And we all have a unique perspective of a reality that we are sharing together. If we are in the old world mentality, we believe that we have to find which one is the best perspective and adopt it.
Or we believe that everyone sees the world as I see it, right? That's also...
Yeah, basically we do blocks. So there is the block of people who see reality from that angle, and then there is the block of people who see reality from that angle, and they have their champions and they fight with one another. Yeah. And what they don't understand is that the reality that we share together is multidimensional, and that perspectives are not to be confronted with one another, to know who has the best one. They have to be combined together to be enlarged and deepened. I'm going to give you an example of how it can look like, an easy example. And this I realized it after my spiritual awakening. I was looking at this debate between two intellectuals, and they were talking about a sensitive subject. The sensitive subject are going to touch our traumas, basically, our unresolved traumas. There's no sensitive subject. There's just wounds that we haven't dealt with. But anyway, so a subject that was going to touch trauma, and this was the root of Islamic terrorism. And so there was a French atheist intellectual, and there was a French Muslim intellectual. And the French atheist intellectual was saying, well, it's not that complicated. Just read the Quran. There is verse which are so violent toward non-believers. There is also the story of the prophet, which has propagated his belief system through war and conquest. And of course, this is emulated among some of the believers. The problem is within the religious text and the story of the prophet. And on the other side, there was the Muslim intellectual was saying, no, the problem is with Western culture, materialism, the arrogance of the West, the history of colonialism, the marginalization of religious minorities in Western culture that creates so much anger among believers that some are ready to take weapons and kill for their religions. And what I realized before my spiritual awakening, I would have picked side, and probably I would have felt that moment more close culturally from the atheist intellectual. But at that moment, I realized that actually both were true. That actually the Muslim intellectual was looking at the shadow of the Western culture. The Western intellectual was looking at the shadow of the Muslim culture. It's almost like they had the key for each other, but instead of exchanging the key and be like, you know what, you're right, you're pointing at our cultural weakness. And we as a tribe, as human beings, as a group of human beings, we need to address that to improve and exchange their keys. They were fighting, trying to push their view on the other. And so that's how ridiculous it is, right? And most of the time, we don't even notice it because we are talking about so superficial subjects that we don't even reach the depths where this one was touching something deep. And therefore, there was this kind of, very often they're talking about how we should, for example, how we should deal with the debt. We're not even realizing that the debt is a social construct, but that's not the story. But basically what I want to say is that here what we saw is that two humans that both had the key for each other, and instead of exchanging their keys, were fighting an ego battle to push their view on each other. And so one of the key is to let go of this idea that I will only be able to share my truth when and feel safe if people agree with me. No. You share your truth, you let others share their truth, and together we make sense of reality. And so letting go of the fear of being judged, because also one of the issues here is that just as we are identified with our social constructs, we are also identified with our belief systems.